tell me about how you began to sort of find yourself as a character actor in improv.
Well, improv is very important to me. It changed me as an actor, and it changed me to some extent as a person as well. The thing about improv is that most people think of improv as making things up.
Yeah.
But the kind of improvisation that I admire was invented by a woman called Viola Spolin, I think in the 30s in Chicago. And she worked a lot with children. And what the point of her kind of improv was to make such good contact with the people you're working with that stuff comes out of you that you didn't expect to come out of you.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of making things up. It's a question of letting things emerge because you're not thinking about what you're going to do or say next. You're thinking about something else. Each of her games or exercises puts you at work on consciously working on some problem that you have to solve. And your unconscious is free to roam then. And the creative happens that way.
I mean, in improv, and I know you've talked about this in a little bit in your books and in your other writings, you really have to play off other people, right? It's the success of an improv troupe is the success of bouncing ideas and words and moments off others, which I would imagine would serve you well because you would go on to serve in two hugely important ensembles, MASH and West Wing. And I wonder if there's a little bit of that improv, or maybe a lot of that improv sensibility that would transfer over to those roles and those experiences.
I think so. The notion, there are two things about improv that are very helpful in a performance, in acting. One is that you relate to the other person, you let the other person in, and you respond to what the other person is doing or saying, but not just as an idea, but what's really happening, what they're really giving you, what they really mean under the surface. So that's very important. The other thing that's very important is that it gives you spontaneity.
Yeah.
You know, if acting is just a series of you saying your lines and then I say my lines, then you say your line.
Right.
That doesn't seem like life.
No.
Spontaneity comes in when I really respond in a millisecond to what I'm getting from you. And you do the same with what you're getting from me. And then it comes to life.
Did you, I mean, I have to assume that because you have this sort of, bloodline in acting, that there was some natural talent there, but natural talent isn't always enough. It's almost never enough. You have to begin to hone the craft. And I wonder when do you remember really starting to feel confident as an actor, the craft of actually assimilating and becoming a different human being and embodying that human being? When do you remember thinking, I got this?
Pretty much never. I think I invent a new system, a new method every time I act. It's really interesting. I had confidence that was, in a way, unfounded. I always had the confidence to get up and perform. But I never thought I knew how to do it and I had it down. Mm-hmm. It was always an improvisation. It was always finding out as I went, how do you do this thing? And to some extent, that's still true for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I mean, I've read about some of the actors that you were on stage with as a young man, and you were on stage with great actors. But of course, you would go on to become a great actor yourself. And I wonder, over the course of your career, do you have that experience where you are acting with somebody else and you think, this person is just so much better than me, I can never be as good as that person?
No.
No. Okay.
I can't remember anything like that. What I do remember many times, whether they're actors you've heard of or not,
Yeah.
is getting the real thing from them and being so grateful that I was talking to the character. I wasn't talking to somebody mouthing the lines of the character. I just remember being very grateful that I had a person of such quality to work with, whether or not I had the same quality. I mean, certainly it's got to be true that I know I learned a lot as I went along, because I can see early examples of my work. Sometimes by accident it comes up on a screen, and I see I wouldn't have done it that way if I had the experience then that I have now.
Yeah. When you get your first break on Broadway, I think this is 1959, I think it was your Broadway debut. I think it was Only in America. You had a role as telephone man in that. Was that, I mean, what do you remember about that moment? I mean, did it feel like a breakthrough? I know you'd done theater in Cleveland and you'd done improv and you'd been on the stage elsewhere, but this is Broadway. This was the world's biggest stage. Did it feel like you had finally made it? I mean, you were still young. You were 24, 25 years old.
I'm smiling as you describe it that way. I had 7 lines as the telephone man.
Yeah.
And most of them I spoke from the top of a telephone pole at the side of a stage. And I auditioned for the play while I was a doorman on 48th Street. And I didn't have time to change into regular clothes, so I went to the audition with the pants from the doorman job with the stripe down the side of the pants. And I auditioned. I said the 7 lines, and later found out I was in the show. But what it meant to me was not, now finally I'm on Broadway. What it meant to me was, we'll get a couple of weeks' work out of this.
Yeah.
That's not standing on the sidewalk, hailing cabs, which was all good, by the way. I always learned something with the unromantic, non-acting jobs.
In those early years of your professional career, when you were kind of hustling for whatever roles you could get, because you would get another role, I think, a couple years later on Broadway, and then you would even get a part in a film in 1963. But I wonder, what do you remember about working on the craft of acting and trying to discover these different characters and how to be them? What are the kind of things you would do to get better at that?
I was making it up as I went along.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see that it's customary now for actors to get formal training.
Yeah.
I never had formal training, except the improvising workshops I went to. And once I took mime class from the guy who taught Marcel Marceau. His name was 𝐸𝐴𝐻𝐸. And that was great. I loved the mime class. Except one of the exercises involved falling forward on your face and catching yourself just before your nose hit the floor with your hands on the floor, which I didn't really understand the value of, because I came very close to breaking my nose a couple of times.